Michael stood by the window, gazing out at the skyline of Seattle. The soft hum of city life below was distant, yet ever-present. His apartment, perched high in the Capitol Hill district, had been his sanctuary, a place where he felt the security of his hard-earned success. He had everything he could ever ask for: a prestigious job, a loving wife, and a life that many would envy. Yet today there was a gnawing feeling in the pit of his stomach, a feeling he couldn't shake. It had started a week ago when Rachel had seemed off. Not in any way that could be easily pinpointed, no arguments, no fights, but little things had changed. Her usual cheerful demeanor had become a bit more distant, and there were times when she'd look at him with a strange sadness in her eyes. Michael, ever the methodical thinker, dismissed it at first. He was an engineer trained to focus on facts, logic, and patterns. But something inside him told him that the patterns weren't adding up. Michael's life had always been predictable. He was used to routines, especially his work trips. He traveled often, leaving Rachel to manage things at home. She had always been independent, thriving in her job as a marketing manager for a major e-commerce company. Michael trusted her implicitly, perhaps too much. The late-night phone calls from work, the spontaneous trips with colleagues, that sometimes kept her away for longer than expected. It all seemed normal. At least that's what he thought. But last week something had changed. He had returned home from a routine business trip to Denver, only to find Rachel acting a bit too cheerful. She had made his favorite dinner, the one they hadn't had in months. She seemed overly attentive, as if trying to make up for something. At first, Michael didn't think much of it. But as he walked through their apartment that night, something felt wrong. It wasn't the dinner or the way she smiled at him. It was something deeper, a vibe in the air that made his chest tighten. It was then that the message came. Michael's phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. The notification was from Alex, the property manager of their apartment complex. It was strange. Alex usually sent messages for maintenance updates or to confirm tenant payments, not for anything personal. Michael frowned as he read the message. "Michael, can we talk when you get a chance? It's a delicate matter." The words "delicate matter" caught his attention, and a chill ran down his spine. Alex was not one for pleasantries. He was direct, almost abrasive. Michael felt a knot form in his stomach as he typed a quick reply, agreeing to meet the next day. What could be so delicate? He spent the rest of the evening tossing and turning, his mind racing with all the possibilities. The following day, Michael entered the building's conference room. Alex was already there, sitting stiffly at the glass table. His usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced with an unease that Michael immediately noticed. Alex wasn't making eye contact, and his hands fidgeted with a pen, spinning it nervously. "Michael, thanks for coming," Alex started, his voice lower than usual. "I don't really know how to say this." Michael sat across from him, his eyes narrowed. "Just say it, Alex." Alex took a deep breath, clearly gathering himself before he spoke. "There have been several complaints about noises coming from your apartment." Michael's heart skipped a beat. "Noises?" he asked, his voice tight with confusion. Alex hesitated before continuing. "Loud noises? Moaning. Female moaning, to be specific. The neighbors downstairs and next door, they've all written complaints. It's been happening at night, mostly when you've been away." Michael froze. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. He had always trusted Rachel. Never for a second did he consider that there could be something going on behind his back. But now, his mind began racing. The trips. The late nights. The quiet conversations when he was home, but still felt a wall between them. His chest tightened. When were these complaints filed? Michael asked, his voice barely a whisper. Alex shuffled through a few papers on the table, avoiding Michael's gaze. "They all coincide with the times when you were away on business. Over the past 3 months, we've received 5 separate complaints." The words hit Michael like a punch to the gut. 5 complaints. 5 separate instances when Rachel had been alone in their apartment. His mind whirled as he tried to make sense of it, but all he could hear was the silence of the room, filled only by the sound of his heartbeat. "I appreciate you telling me," Michael said, standing up with surprising composure. "I'll take care of it." Alex nodded quickly, clearly relieved the conversation was over. "I just thought you should hear it directly before it becomes gossip." Michael walked out of the conference room, his legs heavy as he made his way to the elevator. Inside, he tried to process the conversation, but it was as if the words didn't belong to him. They didn't make sense. Back in their apartment, Rachel was in the kitchen, humming softly as she chopped vegetables. She turned to greet him, her usual warm smile on her face. Michael watched her, his mind racing. Could she really have been hiding something from him? All this time? That night, as they lay in bed together, Michael couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of Rachel's breathing beside him. His mind ran through every moment of their life together. The anniversaries, the family dinners, the quiet nights spent in each other's company. But now, everything felt like it had been a lie. For the next few days, Michael went through the motions. Meetings, emails. But his mind was elsewhere. It was as if the world had shifted on its axis, and he was struggling to catch up. He wasn't going to confront Rachel, at least not yet. He needed answers. He needed proof. And he would find it. His next business trip to Austin, Texas came soon, and Michael saw it as the perfect opportunity. But instead of going as planned, he changed his flight at the last minute and returned home early. He checked into a hotel a few blocks away from their apartment, determined to watch and wait. He had to see it with his own eyes. The first night, Michael set up his binoculars and kept his eyes trained on their apartment. Nothing unusual. But the second night something changed. Around 9 p.m., he noticed the lights in the apartment flicker off, except for a faint blue glow from the bedroom. Half an hour later, he saw a silhouette in the living room, a silhouette that didn't belong to Rachel. His heart pounded in his chest as he adjusted the binoculars. Two figures, too close for comfort, moving through the living room. Michael's breath caught in his throat. He had seen enough. That night he didn't sleep. The next evening Michael was on edge. He had seen what he needed to see, but the confrontation still felt miles away. The pain of betrayal had hit him hard, but he couldn't afford to let his emotions cloud his judgment. He had to be meticulous, calculated. After all, he was an engineer, a problem solver by nature. He couldn't let anger drive his actions. Not yet. Around 8:30 p.m., Michael gathered his nerve and made his way to the apartment building. He parked his car several blocks away, taking care not to attract attention. Using the remote for the garage door, he entered without a sound. He wasn't sure what he expected, but he knew one thing. He was done living in the dark. It was time to get the truth, no matter how much it hurt. He walked up the emergency stairs, avoiding the elevator as he moved silently through the hall. When he reached the 8th floor, his pulse quickened. His hand hovered over the door handle to his apartment, feeling the cold metal beneath his fingers. He paused, listening. Everything was silent. Too silent. Michael took a deep breath and slowly turned the handle, pushing the door open just enough to slip inside. The apartment was dimly lit, the soft glow from the living room's decorative lamps casting long shadows across the floor. He moved quietly through the hallway, past the kitchen where Rachel's perfume still lingered in the air. He could hear soft music playing from the living room, a jazz station that they used to listen to together. As he got closer to the bedroom, Michael felt his stomach tighten. He could hear muffled voices. One was Rachel's, low, familiar and warm, but the other voice was deeper, unfamiliar. Michael's feet moved on their own, carrying him to the bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. Through the small gap he saw them. Rachel was in bed, the soft glow of the bedside lamp illuminating her face. She was lying next to another man, her body turned toward him in a way Michael had never seen before. Her hand rested on his chest and she laughed, laughing in a way that sent a cold shiver down Michael's spine. It was the laugh of someone completely at ease, someone who wasn't even pretending anymore. Michael stood frozen in the doorway for a moment, his mind trying to comprehend the image before him. Dominic. The man beside Rachel was Dominic, a close business associate of hers. Someone Michael had trusted, someone he had even shared drinks with at company events. The same Dominic who had always been introduced as Rachel's mentor in the real estate world. But now here he was lying in Michael's bed with his wife. The sound of Michael's breath, deeper and more strained than usual, must have made them aware of his presence. Rachel's head snapped toward the door, her face pale. Her eyes widened in shock, but there was no shame, no attempt to hide what had just been exposed. Dominic, now fully aware of Michael's presence, quickly scrambled to sit up, fumbling with his clothes. "Michael," Rachel whispered, her voice shaking. But Michael wasn't ready to hear her explanations. "How long, Rachel?" he asked, his voice colder than he felt. He had expected anger or at least some kind of emotional outburst, but instead his words came out in a detached, calculated tone. Rachel opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. The silence in the room stretched long and heavy. Dominic, his face flushed with a mix of guilt and fear, broke the silence first. "Michael, please," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "We didn't mean for this to happen. It just—" "Shut up," Michael cut him off. His eyes moved from Dominic to Rachel, and he could see her trembling. She tried to reach out, but he stepped back, distancing himself from the woman he had once called his partner in life. 7 years, Rachel, Michael said, his voice trembling now but not with anger, more like the weight of everything crashing down. 7 years. That's how long this has been going on, isn't it? Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't answer. She could barely meet his gaze, and that spoke louder than any words could. Michael could feel his heart breaking in slow motion, piece by piece. When we celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary, you were already sleeping with him, weren't you? Michael continued, his voice steady despite the chaos inside him. When I was traveling for work, you were here with him. When I thought I was giving you the life you wanted, you were here with him in this bed. Rachel's sobs filled the room, but Michael couldn't find it in himself to comfort her. There was nothing left to comfort. He had spent years trusting her, believing that their life together was built on mutual respect and love. But now, it all seemed like an illusion, a lie that had been carefully crafted and maintained. The weight of betrayal settled heavily on Michael's chest. How many times, Rachel? How many times did you look at me and tell me you loved me while you were planning to meet him the moment I turned my back? Rachel could barely speak. She was shaking, her hands covering her face in a futile attempt to hide from the truth. Michael turned away, unable to look at her anymore. Every fiber of his being wanted to scream, to shout, to demand answers. But he knew that none of it mattered anymore. I don't understand how you could do this to me, Michael said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. I worked so hard to give us this life. And you betrayed me in the worst way possible. For a moment there was only silence. Then Dominic stood, moving toward the door, clearly trying to make his escape. I think I should go, he muttered. Michael didn't stop him. Yes, you will, Michael replied, his voice hardening. And Rachel? You'll be the one to deal with the consequences of this. As Dominic quickly left, Michael stood still in the room, taking in the devastation that surrounded him. This was his life now, broken, shattered, and filled with a pain that he never saw coming. Rachel's cries echoed in the background, but Michael couldn't bring himself to console her. There was no going back from this. Not now. Tomorrow, Michael said, his voice steady, I'll hire a lawyer. And in a year we'll be divorced. Because that's what this life has come to. As he walked out of the bedroom, leaving Rachel behind in the ruins of their once perfect life, Michael knew that he could never rebuild what they had. 7 years of lies had destroyed everything. Michael sat in his new office the next day, his mind still reeling from the confrontation. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting a muted glow on his desk. His hands, though steady, seemed to move in slow motion as he sifted through emails, returning to his usual routine. But no matter how much he tried to focus on work, the images from the night before played on repeat in his mind, the way Rachel had looked at him, the way Dominic tried to escape with an air of guilt. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Curtis, his lawyer, a seasoned professional in family law, someone Michael had trusted with what he knew would be a complicated and bitter divorce. Curtis stepped inside, his face grim, the weight of the situation clear in his eyes. Michael, Curtis began, settling into the chair across from him, I've gone over the preliminary paperwork. We'll need to meet with Rachel to get the process started, but we need to be thorough. You've been through a lot already, and now we need to build a case. Michael nodded, his throat tight as he leaned back in his chair. I've already got enough evidence, he said quietly. She and Dominic have been involved for years. It's not just the affair, there's financial misconduct too. Curtis raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Michael hesitated. The depth of the deception still felt unreal, even after everything he had uncovered. But the numbers didn't lie. His accountant's mind had gone into overdrive after the confrontation. He'd started digging through their joint accounts, combing through their financial records. What he found shocked him more than the affair itself. I found irregularities in the accounts, Michael continued, his voice steady. Transfers from our joint account to a personal one of Rachel's. Over $50,000 in the last 7 years. It looks like she and Dominic were splitting commission payments under the table, and that money went into a separate account I didn't even know existed. Curtis's expression darkened. That's a serious issue, Michael. We can use this in your favor when we start the asset division. It strengthens your case for marital asset dissipation. Michael looked at Curtis, feeling a mix of anger and numbness. I'm not doing this for revenge. I just need the truth out there. I need her to pay for what she's done, but I also need to move on. This has gone too far. Curtis nodded. I understand. We'll take this step by step, but we're going to get you what you're entitled to. And once this is all over, you can start fresh. The words "start fresh" didn't feel real. How could he ever truly start fresh when his entire life had been built on a lie? He had trusted Rachel with everything, his career, his heart, his dreams. And yet, here he was, a man broken and alone, questioning every decision he had ever made. As Michael left the office, he couldn't shake the feeling that something else was still left to be uncovered. The financial misconduct, the affair. Those were the facts. But what about the lies Rachel had told him? What about the years she had spent pretending to be someone she wasn't? Later that evening, as he sat in his small apartment, the one he'd rented after the divorce papers were signed, Michael found himself pacing. He had been avoiding Rachel's calls for days. Every message, every text, every voicemail from her felt like another attempt to rewrite history, to erase what had happened. But he knew he couldn't let her control the narrative any longer. That night his phone rang again. It was Rachel. He stared at the screen for a moment before answering. "What do you want, Rachel?" There was a long pause on the other end before she spoke, her voice shaking. "Michael, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But please, can we talk? I want to explain." Michael's grip tightened on the phone. He wanted to hang up. He wanted to tell her to leave him alone. But there was a part of him that needed closure, that needed to hear her say the words he had been waiting for. Even if it didn't change anything. "I don't want an explanation, Rachel," he said, his voice cold. "I don't need to hear your excuses. 7 years. That's how long you've been lying to me." Rachel's voice faltered. "It wasn't like that. You don't understand. It's complicated." "Complicated?" Michael's voice rose, though he quickly reined it in. "No, Rachel. It's simple. You were unfaithful. You lied. And you betrayed me. There's nothing complicated about that." The silence stretched between them for a moment. Rachel's sobs were faint but audible. "I never wanted to hurt you, Michael. I never meant for any of this to happen." Michael closed his eyes, trying to hold back the flood of emotions that were threatening to overwhelm him. "But you did, Rachel. You hurt me. And I can't forgive you for that." He ended the call before she could say anything else. The sound of her voice still lingered in his ears, but the anger that had once consumed him had dulled. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about survival. The next day, Michael met with Curtis again to finalize their plan. The divorce process was moving forward, but there was still so much more to untangle. He didn't know what would happen in the coming months. He didn't know if he could ever trust again. But he was certain of one thing. This chapter of his life was closing, and it was time to turn the page. Michael knew that rebuilding wouldn't be easy. But it had to start somewhere. And for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was in control of his own future. The weeks that followed were a blur for Michael. Each day felt like a repeat of the one before, a cycle of meetings, legal consultations, and cold nights spent alone in his apartment. The pain of betrayal lingered like a shadow, but he refused to let it consume him. Slowly, methodically, he began to rebuild the parts of his life that had once felt solid, though it seemed like everything was still cracked beneath the surface. At work, Michael kept his distance from colleagues, too consumed by his own turmoil to engage with others. His once promising career as an engineer, which had filled him with pride, now seemed like just another piece of his old life, one that had fallen apart along with his marriage. He couldn't shake the thought that, if he had been more present at home, if he had paid more attention, maybe none of this would have happened. But he knew that kind of thinking was useless. The truth was out there now, and all he could do was accept it and move forward. Rachel's attempts to contact him had dwindled. Her messages had become more desperate, pleading for forgiveness, but Michael had no intention of replying. He didn't need closure from her. What he needed was to understand how to live with what had happened. It was in the midst of this turmoil that Michael received an unexpected call, one that would open the door to a truth even darker than the betrayal he had already uncovered. It was late one evening, just as Michael was finishing a simple dinner of takeout. The phone rang and he glanced at the screen. The number was unfamiliar, but something about the caller's area code sparked a brief flicker of recognition. Without hesitation he answered. "Michael Castellano?" the voice on the other end asked, its tone formal yet oddly familiar. "This is Michael," he replied, unsure of who was calling. "My name is Olivia Moore. I'm a reporter for the Seattle Times. I have some information that might interest you about your ex-wife, Rachel." Michael sat up straighter, a knot forming in his stomach. The name Olivia Moore meant nothing to him, but the mention of Rachel sent his mind reeling. "What about Rachel?" he asked cautiously. Olivia's voice dropped lower, as if ensuring no one could overhear their conversation. "I'm sure you're aware that Rachel's affair wasn't the only thing she's been hiding." Over the years, I've been investigating some unusual activities within the real estate company she worked for. There are rumors, and I've come across some records suggesting that Rachel, along with Dominic Weaver, was involved in a much larger scheme. Michael's heart began to race. What kind of scheme? Olivia hesitated for a moment. It's about financial fraud, Michael. From what I've gathered, Rachel and Dominic have been manipulating commission structures to funnel money into private accounts. Not just yours and Rachel's, but into other accounts tied to the company. There's more to this story, and I think you need to know exactly what she was involved in. Michael's mind swirled with confusion and disbelief. He had already uncovered the financial misconduct tied to Rachel's personal account, but hearing that there might be more, something bigger, made his stomach churn. He had to know more, even if it meant dredging up the past he so desperately wanted to leave behind. What do you have on this? Michael asked, his voice trembling slightly. How do you know all this? Olivia explained that her investigation had been ongoing for months, and she had been tracking a series of suspicious transactions related to Rachel's company. It seemed that Rachel and Dominic were not just having an affair, they were also involved in a massive money laundering operation, using their professional connections to cover up the illegal activities. Olivia had access to certain documents, bank records, emails, and corporate communications that confirmed Rachel's role in the operation. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the power, the manipulation, and the network they had created to shield themselves from suspicion. This isn't just about the affair anymore, Olivia continued. This is bigger than that. And I think you deserve to know what your ex-wife has been doing behind your back. You deserve the full truth. Michael's mind raced as he processed the information. The betrayal Rachel had committed went far beyond infidelity. It was an intricate web of deception and corruption, something that threatened to ruin everything in its path. How could she have been so reckless, so blinded by her own ambition? I need the proof, Michael said, his voice sharp with determination. I want everything you have. I need to see the documents. I want to know how deep this goes. Olivia agreed to meet the next day. She had compiled all the information she had uncovered into a detailed report, along with the evidence she had gathered. Michael's mind was a whirlpool of thoughts. Part of him wanted to walk away from all of it, to leave Rachel's world behind and start fresh. But the accountant in him couldn't resist. He needed answers. And once he had them, he would make sure Rachel faced the consequences. The next afternoon, Michael met Olivia at a quiet cafe in a secluded corner of Seattle. She handed him a folder filled with documents, emails, and financial statements. As he flipped through the pages, Michael felt the weight of each new revelation settle over him. Rachel's lies were much deeper than he had ever imagined. The affair wasn't the only secret she had been hiding. There were years of financial manipulation, shady dealings, and illegal transactions that had been buried under the guise of a perfect life. With every page he turned, Michael's resolve hardened. He couldn't let her get away with this. He had already lost too much. His marriage, his trust, his peace of mind. Now, it was time to make sure Rachel faced the consequences of her actions. Later that evening, as he sat in his apartment, Michael looked over the documents again. His fingers ran over the details, absorbing each piece of evidence. This wasn't just about money or betrayal. It was about justice. And he would make sure it was served. As the night wore on, Michael found himself staring out the window once more, watching the city lights twinkle below. The man who had once been married to Rachel was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone determined to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. And with that truth came the knowledge that he could finally move on, he could rebuild his life, piece by piece. The weight of the truth felt heavy, but Michael knew it was the only thing that could set him free. The days following his meeting with Olivia were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and contemplation. Michael had everything he needed now: the proof of Rachel's financial crimes, the affair that had lasted for years, and the elaborate web of deceit she had woven around their marriage. Yet, despite the satisfaction of knowing the truth, there was still a part of him that couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness. Rachel's betrayal had rocked him to his core. It wasn't just the affair, it was the years of lies, the manipulation, and the calculated efforts to keep him in the dark. She had built an entire life of deceit, all while he was left believing that everything was fine. Michael had always prided himself on being able to see through numbers, on being able to spot inconsistencies in data and accounts. But Rachel had deceived him in a way that no spreadsheet could ever reveal. Despite the anger that simmered beneath the surface, Michael knew he needed to face her. He had spent days wondering what he would say, how he would confront her, and what the consequences would be. But no matter how many times he rehearsed in his head, There was no easy way to go about this. She had betrayed him in the worst possible way, and now, it was time for her to face the music. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when Michael decided to meet with Rachel. His lawyer had warned him not to confront her without legal representation, but Michael was done with the games. He didn't need a lawyer to tell him what was right and wrong. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about justice. He arrived at their old apartment complex, now a place that felt like a ghost of a life he once had. As he approached the front door, the doorman who had seen him come and go for years, gave him a polite nod. Michael returned it with a brief smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. This wasn't the man he used to be. Not anymore. Rachel answered the door when he knocked, her face ashen, eyes bloodshot from days of crying. For a moment they just stared at each other. Two people who had once shared everything, but now stood on opposite sides of a chasm too wide to cross. "Michael," she began, her voice cracking. "I didn't expect you to come here, not like this. Please, can we talk?" Michael shook his head. "No, Rachel. No more talking. I know everything. The affair, the money, the lies. I don't need any more explanations. There's nothing you can say that will make it right." Her eyes welled up with tears as she stepped back, allowing him inside. Michael didn't want to be here, didn't want to relive the moments that once felt so comfortable, so familiar. But he had to. He had to confront her, to finally take back the life that she had stolen from him. "I'm so sorry, Michael," Rachel said, her voice barely a whisper. "I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was selfish. I didn't think about you, about us. I didn't think about what this would do to you." Michael clenched his fists at his sides, trying to control the anger that was bubbling up inside of him. "You thought you were doing the right thing? By lying to me for 7 years? By destroying everything we had? You didn't just betray me, Rachel. You destroyed our marriage. You destroyed the trust we built together." Rachel took a step toward him, her face pleading. "Please, Michael. I know I've hurt you, but I'm not the same person anymore. I've learned from my mistakes and I just want a chance to fix things. Please don't end it like this." Michael shook his head, stepping back. "No. You don't get to decide that, Rachel. You don't get to ask for another chance. Not after everything you've done. I've spent the last few weeks looking at our life together, at everything you've kept hidden from me, and I realized something. I can't keep living in a lie. I can't keep pretending that this is a marriage. This is over." The room fell into a heavy silence, and Rachel's sobs were the only sound breaking it. Michael couldn't bring himself to comfort her. He had done enough of that over the years, while she had betrayed him without a second thought. It was his turn to let go. "You've had your chances, Rachel," Michael said, his voice cold but resolute. "You've had your chance to be honest, to come clean, and you chose not to. Now it's time to move on. It's time for me to move on." Rachel collapsed onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. "I never wanted to hurt you, Michael. I swear. I never meant for any of this to happen." Michael felt a pang of sorrow, but it quickly gave way to the realization that no matter how much she apologized, it would never be enough. The damage had already been done. "I'm done, Rachel," Michael said, his voice steady. "I don't need your apologies. I don't need your regret. I need to move forward with my life without you." As he turned to leave, Rachel called out to him one last time. "Please, Michael, don't let us end like this. I love you." The words hit him like a wave, but they no longer had the same power. The love they had shared had been replaced by betrayal, by lies, and by the realization that the woman he had loved was someone he no longer recognized. He didn't respond to her. He couldn't. He just walked out, shutting the door softly behind him. As he stood in the hallway, Michael felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. The truth had been uncovered, the betrayal laid bare. And now it was time for him to move on. In the days that followed, Michael began to take the necessary steps to rebuild his life. The divorce process was far from easy, but with Curtis's help, he managed to navigate the legal complexities. The financial misconduct Rachel had engaged in would weigh heavily in his favor during the property division. He had lost a lot, but he had gained something much more valuable: his freedom. Michael spent the following months focusing on his career, reconnecting with old friends, and rediscovering the things he had once loved. He found solace in small, quiet moments, cooking meals for himself, walking through parks, reading books he had forgotten about. And slowly he began to heal. One day, as he sat in a cafe near his new apartment, Michael realized he was finally ready to let go of the past. He would never forget what Rachel had done to him, but he no longer felt consumed by the anger or the pain. He had reclaimed his life and with it, his sense of self-worth. He wasn't the man he had been when he married Rachel. He had grown stronger, wiser, and more resilient. And now, for the first time in a long time, Michael felt like he was truly free.